Hello Topaz Studio users, this is Joe Jasper and I'm going to use this picture from the internet. Here's the website for reference. I inspected the element and couldn't find a copyright reference. We'll assume that the image has been purchased by Bolu and we're advertising for them right now using their own advertisement. Place to go visit in Southampton, looks lovely. This is a view from the Mill Pond side. And I copied this and saved it to a temporary place. We'll close that. And then what I did was I ran it through JPEG to RAW, AI gigapixel 2.5 times, and a little sharpening, decrease the saturation to end up with this nice photograph. And what we're going to do is convert it into a nighttime picture. I may pause the video here for seconds at a time just to take some shortcuts so you don't have to be tortured too much by my droning on. First thing to do is to go back to our original image and clean it up a bit. Get rid of the people, maybe get rid of some of these branches. So I'm going to get rid of the people using a clone tool, or a healing tool, excuse me. And this is often easy enough like that, but sometimes we get smudgy effects. It's not going to really affect our impression that we end up at the end. And again, I feel comfortable messing with this guy's picture only because it's not going to be the same picture when we're done with it. It's going to be an artistic image, just like if you had somebody's postcard where the image is owned and you're not reproducing it commercially, you're just using it for fun and perhaps making it into a painterly effect that you don't really have to worry about it looking anything like the guy's original painting other than the form. So we're getting pretty close to eliminating a lot of the parts that we don't like. I'm going to click done here. I'm going to take a color overlay, pick the color. You know what, I'm going to decrease that first. I'm going to pick the color from the screen here like this. Say OK. Put a mask on. Invert the mask. Bring the opacity all the way up. And now I'm going to have this exact sky blue to clone over these other parts by using a white brush. And I don't want to torture you too much. We're just going to do this roughly and get on with the real parts. But there, boom. And we're going to click apply. Now we've got a much cleaner image to deal with, and we'll get into the magic. So the magic is going to be converting this daytime, colorful, full palette look to nighttime. What happens at night? Instead of using the cones and the retina for a dark scene, we're using the rods, and those pretty much are black and white. But there will be some color coming from windows and the light they cast elsewhere. So again, this is the look we're going to achieve, or come close to. After all, I did this yesterday. It's not saved on this computer, all the steps. So I'm going to use a color overlay instead of desaturating this, and we'll use something like a periwinkle color, and it really doesn't matter too much which darkness we use because we're going to go in after we say OK to the blending mode and change it to color. And I think that it's not here. Let's turn this all the way up. I don't think it matters too much. Yeah, here we go. Somewhere in the middle, maybe. So here's the colors I used. So if you have the ability to type this into your own, you can pause and copy those down and get that effect. But we're going to decrease the color opacity a little, let some of the original color show through, just like, oh, maybe it's kind of be able to be used later on. And then we go into adjustments, basic adjustments, and we darken everything. In the bright overhead moonlight, usually the shadows are very deep, and we get a lot of contrast. I'm going to bring up some of the shadows. I also want to get some more detail in here, so I'm bringing up that clarity quite a bit here. And I'm not going to touch the black level and the contrast. I am going to use HSL to go into the blues and decrease the lightness of the sky, but maybe bring some of the saturation back here. And a tone curve. What we do with the tone curve now is to grab sort of in the midtones and bring it down a little bit. And I want to preserve some of those highlights though, so I'm going to bring it a little more to the right, to the left, I mean, right in the middle maybe. Bring it down, and now we're all of a sudden looking mostly like moonlight. Again, you'll spend time tweaking. So kind of blue hour look here. That looks good. The one thing that we don't have, or what? We don't have stars. I did apply that just so that I could move on. Again, I'm not going to worry about these little things in the sky for you today. So now I got to go into textures. And I'm going to look for, under textures, I have what is it? I have this one. And you can see the stars are right now over everything. So we're going to have to make a mask and get rid of this. I'll do that for you here in a second. And also, I want the sky to be darker with fewer stars than this. I'm going to increase the contrast a little bit, and that'll thin out some of the excess stars. I think that's actually one of my snow effects. Could play with the detail too to change the strength and size of some of those stars, and maybe make it a little darker too. That'll get rid of some of the weak stars. I think right about there is actually looking pretty good. So I'm going to pause and make my mask. Okay, so I've created a mask here. It's really easy with some masks and harder with others, but this one was pretty simple. And so now I don't have stars in the foreground like I did before. So now we've gone from day to night pretty successfully. But what we need is some lights in our windows, some reflections onto the water, and some light effects on the foreground, maybe darkening up some of these too bright seawalls here. So I'm going to just apply that, skip ahead, get rid of this one. Don't need that. And here's the next step. We need to put in color overlays for the windows. And I'm going to start with a bright yellow here. And we're going to maybe try linear light. And again, we need a mask because we only want it on the windows. Invert the mask by clicking that. And a white brush that's got to get smaller here. And I'm going to turn off edge aware. Now we're getting some lights in the windows. Maybe a little smaller on the brush for this one. And I'm not trying to avoid the structures in the window here. That's just a little too much work. It'll look just fine, especially as a painting. Maybe some lights on in here. And if it's not strong enough of an effect, we'd turn it up a little bit. Lights off, lights on, somewhere happily in between. And actually, when I have them up bright, I can see I need a little more in the edges here. It's okay for some weird things to be in the window, right? There could be a person standing in there or whatever that would make it look different. Okay, now sometimes we don't want all the windows to be the same brightness though, so you can use your mask transparency to change that. Maybe I want this one window to be brighter than any other in this instance. One of the things I can do is adjust my mask and then change things. So I can shift this density slider off to the right, get the right look in these windows, and then come back with my white brush and just do this window, and that'll see how that's now brighter than these windows. And that's because this little white dot that I put on my mask is pure white, and these are a gray tone, right? So we're looking good. Maybe I want this to be brighter though. There we go. Cool. All right, so now we got lights on in the windows. But those lights don't just shine in the window, they shine out of the window too. So we're going to put in another layer, this time with a bit more orange cast to it, maybe even peachy and a little darker. Again, invert the make a mask, invert the mask, choose a brush, make it white. Now we're going to go for something more diffuse though, so make the brush pretty darn soft and choose a size of brush that's appropriate. And I'm just going to click on this window, but I actually want to first change this to one of my favorite modes of color dodge and add a little bit of glow around that window. A little bit of glow around that window, edge aware off. See how we're getting a little bit of glow around these windows. The other place that I need that is on the trees, but I don't need it very strong because these lights are now going to put a little bit of light. See how that brings some light onto these trees. If we want it a little stronger, just go back and change the transparency. So you can see some of the light from this window is now shining onto these bushes or trees. Over here, maybe not quite as strongly, but still giving us some light effect. And it's the orangish yellow light of incandescence. Also on the lawn and top of the seawall here. Not there, so I'm going to undo that. Remember, this tree is going to block light from hitting onto the lawn. So where is that light going to hit? On the lawn, and maybe a little smaller and stronger, maybe right in here. And I might make it brighter. Let's see what happens. Pretty cool, huh? So in this part here, this tree may be blocking it, so maybe I did that one wrong. Maybe over here a little more. That's looking a little more believable. So that's looking pretty good. And then the same thing over here, this window casting a little bit of light here, this one here, casting right here. and maybe make it more diffuse and bigger, and like so. Some light from all over the place coming in. And there we have lights in the window. Not on the water yet, but at least lights in the window. Looking pretty good. So one thing I sometimes will do is then take the same image that we've just created, lay it on itself, and go to that color dodge mode again, and it really amps up these glowing lights. And we may end up doing this a couple of times. Here's without it. Here's with it a little bit. You can see it's adding to the glow. And what we can actually do is blur this a little bit. A little Gaussian blur. And see the effect. Without with. If it's too strong, dial it back a little bit. Too much. Just right. Okay. So now we just have to add some reflections. I'm going to go for something like this. And we got to decide which overlay mode we're going to use, but first I'm going to apply a mask, invert it, get a white brush, and this window is going to reflect onto the water here somewhere. And this one next to it. I can reshape these, you know. These windows are further back too, so we do want to maybe cut those off a little bit for now and get them a little further away from the shore, whereas this one is closer to the shore and smaller and lower, so its reflection is going to be right in here somewhere. And this door will reflect, and maybe this one's too high and this one's too high to show in our view here, but we've got a few reflections going on here. Good. Now I do need to change this. We can try our color dodge. Overlay, soft light. Soft light's looking interesting. Let's strengthen that. And what I'm going to do is click the adjust on the mask and feather it a little bit. And now that blends into the water nicely. So there's some quick things to do with lights reflecting in the water. Save that. I'm going to now go to an impression effect. And the one I want, I can find by going through impressions and paintings to get there, or I can just type it in here. I know what it is, Turner Sunset 1. And that'll bring it up. You see it looks pretty bizarre right now, huh? Let's turn down the effect a little bit. And all I want to do is use the luminosity of Mr. Turner here. And here's a before and an after. And you can see it's getting diffused a bit by the spill that's in that effect. And it's taking it from the photograph to a little bit of painterly look. So I like that. We're at about 27%. Just play with how much you want. I kind of like that look. Now, these seawalls and stuff are a little too bright for me, so I can choose black or that dark periwinkle again. You can see how it's done a nice job here. I'm going to use a mask though, and let's try luminosity mask. Pick on these windows, and you see how it's made those windows black. These other areas kind of gray to white, and I can always adjust, tweak things a bit. And here's the before and the after. I'm leaving the windows alone, but darkening just about everything else, especially these walls. And we can darken it further all the way to something like that, closer to midnight. Find a right place for us. Maybe around here. One thing I'd caution you though is that if you're going to print this kind of thing, this may be too dark, right? So easy fix for too dark is to layer the image over itself as an image layer and go to screen. That brightens everything, and then you can adjust it down to bring back some of these details that were missing. Like so. And then we're going to put some texture effects on here. Believe it or not, there is a night category. And I like bluesy trees. We can add some bluesy trees. I tend to use a little bit of several effects rather than one effect to full strength. So maybe memory lane, use a little bit of that. And you can look at the different components and decide, gee, I want that, or I don't want that. Maybe I don't want that. Maybe I don't want the vignette. Maybe I do want the vignette. It doesn't look like it's heavy. I think I'll leave it in. And I'm going to apply that. One more effect that I like that's a texture effect is called pushing through. Let's see what happens if I use pushing. There it is, pushing through. And what these textures are helping do is again, give us a little consistency throughout the image. So, getting good. I think I probably should have masked these windows a bit because we've lost some of that glow effect, I think. Maybe not. Here's what we can do. We can do that. And either color dodge. Or overlay. That looks pretty good. So at this point I would sign that and call it a day.